At the edge of the Arctic Circle, where the sun disappears for weeks and the wind cuts like broken glass, there is a place almost no one dares to live. It's not just remote, it's unreachable for most of the year. No roads lead to it, no cell towers stand nearby, and for months at a time, there are no other humans in sight. This place is called Cavite River Camp, and it was home to one woman, Sue Aikens. Sue wasn't just surviving there, she was thriving. She ran a small outpost camp for hunters and bush pilots, repaired snow machines, hauled diesel, hunted her own food. She lived alone, year after year, in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth, and she preferred it that way. But one morning in 2007, that life was nearly taken from her when she was attacked, alone and unarmed, by a massive Arctic grizzly bear. This story is true and contains graphic content that may be disturbing to some viewers. It is shared to honor the resilience of the human spirit and the power of survival against all odds. Sue Aikens didn't end up in the Arctic by accident. She was built for it. Born in 1963, Sue's childhood was anything but ordinary. At age 12, her mother left her alone in a remote cabin in the Alaskan wilderness. No electricity, no plumbing, just an oil lamp, a .22 rifle, and a world of predators. Most people wouldn't survive a month like that. Sue stayed for years. By her 20s, she had lived through blizzards, learned to track and shoot field-dressed caribou, and repaired snowmobiles with nothing but scraps. Her adult years saw her drifting between jobs, mechanic, remote fuel worker, wilderness guide, but the wild kept calling her back. By the time she was 40, Sue had chosen a life few others would dare live. Total solitude, above the Arctic Circle. The Cavite River Camp isn't a town. It's not even a village. It's a flat piece of land just off the river, 197 miles north of the Arctic Circle. It has a runway for bush planes, a main cabin, a fuel depot, and almost nothing else. When the nearest neighbor is hundreds of miles away, you can't just ask for help. If you get hurt, you either fix it yourself or you die. For Sue, this place wasn't just her workplace, it was her sanctuary. In her own words, the wilderness offered clarity. No games, no distractions, just survival. She lived by routines. Check the fuel levels, maintain the airstrip, keep the generator alive, haul water from the river, scan for predators, because out there it's not if something will go wrong, it's when. By late fall of 2007, the Arctic had begun its slow descent into darkness. The sun dipped lower each day. Temperatures hovered at -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and ice began creeping over the riverbanks. That's when Sue noticed the tracks. At first, they were far off, near the outer fuel tanks. Then they showed up at her garbage burn pile. And then, just outside her cabin, large, wide paws, deep claws, the unmistakable sign of a grizzly bear. A big one. Grizzlies in Alaska are apex predators. They weigh 600 to 1,200 pounds, and they don't hibernate all at once. This one hadn't gone to sleep yet. And worse, it wasn't just wandering, it was circling. Sue knew the signs. She'd seen bear kills before, ripped moose carcasses, shredded sled dogs. She knew this wasn't curiosity, it was targeting. The bear had claimed the camp as its territory. It was waiting, watching, and it was going to strike. On a pale December morning, Sue walked down toward the river to check on her water intake pipes. She carried her rifle, but she was relaxed, focused on the ice. She didn't know the bear had hidden in the snowdrifts nearby. Waiting, it exploded out of the brush in complete silence. She turned just as the bear slammed into her. She tried to lift the rifle. It jammed. The bear grabbed her head in its jaws. She felt its teeth pierce her scalp. It bit down, cracking her cheekbone, ripping her skin. It then went for her legs, crushing her hip under its weight. She screamed and fought, but it was like fighting a freight train. And then, suddenly, it let go. The bear walked away. She was still alive, but just barely. Her face was torn. Her hip shattered, her leg bent at the wrong angle. And she was alone. Alone, in the Arctic, with no help coming for days. December 2007. Alone on the frozen riverbank near Kavik Camp, Sue Aikens lay bleeding in the snow. Her rifle was jammed. Her hip was broken. Her scalp had been torn open by a grizzly's teeth. And there was no one coming to help. The pain was overwhelming. Her leg had been mangled, crushed under the bear's weight. Her face was slashed open, bone exposed. Blood gushed from her head, soaking into the snow beneath her. But through the haze of pain, Sue understood one thing. She could not stay where she was. If she stayed, she would die. If she moved, she might live. And so, with shattered bones and half her scalp hanging loose, Sue began to crawl. She had about 200 yards to go, from the riverbank to her cabin, but with only one working arm, a crushed pelvis, and every movement sending new waves of agony through her broken body. Each inch forward felt like a mile. She pulled herself on her stomach, digging her elbows into the snow, gritting her teeth, fighting to stay conscious. Time stopped mattering. There were no hours or minutes anymore, only pain, blood loss, and ice. She doesn't remember how long it took, but inch by inch, foot by foot. She reached the edge of the camp, and then she heard something. The snow crunched behind her. Heavy, deliberate. Sue froze. Her fingers gripped the snow. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might explode, because she knew the bear had come back. She couldn't fight, couldn't run, couldn't reach her rifle, so she did the only thing she could. She played dead. The grizzly approached slowly, sniffing, circling her, nudging her limp, bloodied body with its snout. It was testing her. Then, just like before, the bear turned and disappeared into the wilderness. Sue didn't move for a long time. She waited until the air was silent again, until she could no longer feel the animal's presence. Then, somehow, she started crawling again. Her cabin door was ahead, but it might as well have been miles away. Every movement made her vision spin. Her fingers were turning numb. Blood still ran down her face, soaking her parka. And then she reached the stairs. A small wooden porch, 4 steps up. For a woman with a crushed pelvis and no working leg, it might as well have been Everest. She didn't climb those stairs. She dragged herself up them, one elbow at a time, one groan at a time. She bit down on her sleeve to keep from screaming. And finally, she pulled herself through the door. She collapsed on the floor, cold, bleeding. Alone. No rescue would arrive that day, or the next, because this was Kavik. And out here, you are your own savior. Sue did what she had always done. She got up. She crawled to her supply shelf, and she got to work. She found a needle, a spool of dental floss, some duct tape, a bottle of peroxide. She washed the bear's saliva out of her scalp wound with ice water and peroxide. Then she sewed her skin back together, blind, by feel. She taped her leg in place with duct tape and a splint made from broken chair legs. She crawled to the radio and tried to call for help, but the signal was too weak. All she could do was wait and try not to die. She survived the night, then another and another. 10 days passed. 10 days alone with broken bones. 10 days with no antibiotics, no pain meds. 10 days of watching the door, wondering if the bear would return. 10 days. That's how long Sue Aikens lay broken in her cabin after the bear attack. Her body mangled, her face stitched shut with dental floss, and her leg duct taped in place. And every moment of those 10 days, she thought she might die. Pain comes in waves, but when it never ends, it changes you. Sue stopped marking time by the sun, which barely rose. She tracked it instead by the pain, by when it peaked, by when she could breathe again. There were times she didn't move for hours, Other times, she hallucinated. She imagined wolves scratching at the door, imagined voices on the wind. She remembered her mother leaving her behind as a child, and wondered if this was always meant to be how her story ended. But she wasn't dead yet. And there was still one thing she hadn't tried. The camp's radio tower had been damaged in a previous storm. It worked. Barely. But it was erratic. And worse, the frequencies only connected to bush pilots or local air traffic, if they happened to be flying nearby. Still, it was something. So on the 10th day, Sue pulled herself back to the comms table. She turned the dial. She called out on every frequency she knew. Nothing. She tried again, and again. Then, hours later, a voice. Crackling, faint, but real. It was a bush pilot. Circling 30 miles out, Sue screamed into the radio. She gave her location, her injuries, then silence. The pilot didn't respond. Did the message go through? Did he hear her? Was he coming? She didn't know, so she waited. The next morning, she heard it. A distant hum. Then, a roar. A plane. Sue crawled to the window. She waved a strip of red fabric. The plane landed on the icy airstrip. 2 men stepped out. Rescue workers. Stunned by what they found, they lifted her into the aircraft. She had lost nearly a quarter of her blood. Her leg was dead weight, her face swollen beyond recognition. But she was conscious, and she spoke only one sentence before they took off. "Tell them I fought." The flight to Fairbanks took 2 hours. When they landed, doctors rushed her to emergency trauma care. What they found was almost beyond belief. Her hip was broken in multiple places. Her femur had been crushed. Her scalp had been half torn off, now stitched crudely together with floss. Her facial bones were shattered, but her vitals were stable. She had survived what should have been a fatal mauling, without a single painkiller. Over the next weeks, Sue underwent multiple reconstructive surgeries. Her leg was fitted with metal plates, her face with pins and grafts. Doctors were amazed, but also confused. Why had she gone back to the cabin? Why hadn't she fled the region? Why was she still alive? Her answer was simple. Because if I didn't fight, I'd already be dead. It was then, finally, that her story broke. First to local news, then national, then global. Woman mauled by grizzlies survives 10 days alone in Arctic. It was the kind of survival story people thought only happened in movies. But for Sue, it was real. And her fight wasn't over yet. In the weeks after her evacuation, Sue Aikens lay in a hospital bed in Fairbanks, Alaska, held together by metal plates, surgical sutures, and sheer will. Her skull had been crushed. Her hip was fractured in multiple places. She couldn't walk. She couldn't sleep. And still, she asked the doctors, "When can I go home?" But home wasn't a warm house in the suburbs. It wasn't a condo or even a trailer. Home was a cabin, 500 miles away, surrounded by wolves and ice. And it wasn't waiting patiently. Sue would spend months in rehab. She needed multiple surgeries to reconstruct her leg and face. They inserted metal pins into her jaw and cheekbones. Her pelvis was braced with steel plates. She had to relearn how to stand, then how to walk. Even years later, her right leg would never fully heal. But the pain wasn't just physical. The mental scars were worse. Sue had always been tough, independent, untouchable, but in the dark hours after the attack, as she lay in her hospital bed, the flashbacks came. She dreamed of the bear's breath on her face, the sound of crunching bones, the moment she thought, "This is it. This is how I die." She wouldn't call it fear, but something in her had shifted. She no longer believed in safety. Anywhere. And despite everything, she made a decision that baffled her doctors. She was going back. By summer 2008, barely 6 months after her near-death experience, Sue Aikens returned to Kavik River Camp. She limped off the bush plane slower than before, but still standing. Friends had urged her not to go, to stay down south, to retire, to heal. But she said something that explains everything about Sue Aikens. I would rather die in the place I love than live safely in a place I don't. She rebuilt the fences, fixed the damaged fuel lines, checked the perimeter for bear signs, and picked up where she left off, as if the attack had been just another storm. But the story of what happened to her was far from over, because someone else had heard it, and they had cameras. In 2013, National Geographic approached Sue about joining a new documentary show, Life Below Zero, a series about survivalists in the most extreme environments in Alaska. Sue said yes, and overnight, the world met the woman who had fought a grizzly and won. But Life Below Zero didn't make her a character. It simply showed who she already was. No nonsense, rough-edged, funny, and brutally real. She hauled fuel on a busted hip, butchered caribou in -40 degrees Fahrenheit weather, and handled a snowstorm while joking about duct tape and wolves. Viewers were hooked, not just by the wilderness, but by her. Her story became more than just a survival tale. It became a symbol of grit, of resilience, of what it means to refuse defeat, no matter how bad the odds. But television is a strange kind of mirror. As her audience grew, so did the pressure. People began showing up uninvited to Kavik. Some brought gifts, some brought cameras, some just wanted to see the woman who beat the bear. Fame didn't sit easily with Sue. She wasn't looking for applause. She didn't want fans. She wanted space, silence, the wild. And slowly, she began retreating again from the spotlight, back into the life that had nearly killed her. But she never stopped telling the truth, even when it scared people. Years have passed since that December morning when Sue Aikens was attacked by a grizzly bear near the frozen Kavik River. Her body still carries the scars. Metal pins in her face, a fused hip, nerve damage in her leg, and arthritis that worsens with every cold season. She walks with a limp now, sometimes uses a cane, and every movement reminds her of what she survived. But she's still at Kavik, still alone, still fighting. Because, to Sue Aikens, pain is just part of life. Sue once said, "If you choose a life of comfort, that's fine. But don't expect to feel alive in the way I do." Most people fear pain, fear solitude, fear death. But Sue doesn't run from those things. She looks them in the eye. She lives where the sun disappears for 60 days, where temperatures hit -60 degrees Fahrenheit, where the nearest hospital is 500 miles away. Why? Because for her, survival isn't a punishment. It's a privilege. But time does what no bear ever could. It wears you down, softly, quietly. Sue has had other surgeries since the attack. Back pain, hip issues, cardiac monitoring. The body that once rebuilt engines and hauled fuel now protests with every task. Still, she wakes up every morning, tends to the camp, and checks for predators. Because if she doesn't, no one else will. She knows the odds. She knows one day she won't be able to get up again. But when asked if she's afraid of dying out there, she says, "I'd rather die here, on my terms, than anywhere else." Sue's story is more than a survival tale, more than a bear attack, more than wilderness living. It's about a mindset, about the power of grit and self-reliance and sheer refusal to give up. It's about knowing who you are when everything else is stripped away. Most of us will never be tested like Sue Aikens. Most of us will never fight a bear, or stitch our faces shut with dental floss, or wait 10 days for rescue while holding our insides together with tape. But all of us will face something hard, something painful, something that asks, are you going to give up or fight? Sue never asked to be famous. She didn't go looking for cameras, but her story has become a touchstone. A reason people believe in human resilience again, proof that grit still matters. She's inspired countless others, especially women, to trust their strength, to stop apologizing for toughness, to stop pretending they need to be rescued. Because sometimes there's no one coming. And that's when you learn what you're made of. It's been nearly 2 decades since the bear attack. Sue Aikens still lives at Kivik, still fights the cold, still sleeps with a rifle by the door. And when asked what she regrets, she doesn't mention the pain, or the scars, or even the bear. She just says, "I wouldn't trade this life for anything." Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you rethink what you're capable of, subscribe, like, and follow for more true survival stories. We'll be back soon with more. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, and never stop fighting.